morning, everyone, and welcome to the online service of Quimper Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Although it is located in Port Townsend, Washington, our community now reaches across the country and into other countries. We're so glad you're here. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge that this congregation is located on traditional land of the Salish Coast people. It's with appreciation for and reverence of the indigenous history of this land that I ask us now to take a breath, cognizant of where we are in space and time, grateful that we can live here, and open to what happens in our hour together. In just a moment, we're going to light our chalices together. If you haven't yet done so, this might be a great time to grab your candle and some matches to mark our time together. But before we light the chalice, we will now hear John Hanson on the piano. Our chalice lighting words were shared with us by our guest speaker today, who is Florence Caplow. Let us join voices. We kindle this flame, remembering from our separate places our deep interconnectedness. May the chalice which holds this flame remind us to hold each other and this world in fierce and powerful love and compassion. Thank you, Pat.
I know this rose will open. I know thy fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open.
I know this rose will I know this rose will
I know this rose will
I know
this rose will my fear I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open my fear. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will its wings. I know this rose will open.
We gather on this midsummer day from near and far to be inspired, to be encouraged, and to be reminded of what most matters as we face these uncertain times. An old friend returns to us today to speak about the power of compassion. You'll hear from her in just a bit. In the meantime, let us open our hearts for this sacred hour together. Now, Reverend Florence wanted to share a story about compassion by a puppeteer in her own congregation in Urbana, Illinois. She thought that you would enjoy it, so please join me in welcoming Ann Newman and her puppet friends. What you should know is that one of them has just had a very bad day. Have you ever had a very bad day? And then a friend just did the right thing to make it better?
Hey, where are you? Are you here? You won't believe what happened to me. I was going to the store, and then I got to the store because I was going to buy some stuff. I went to the store, and I was looking for some stuff, and not everybody was wearing masks. Oh, yes, it was terrible. It was terrible, terrible, terrible thing. And so I started down an aisle, and there was somebody going the wrong way. That's right. You know how they got those things on the floor that you gotta watch to see which way to go? Yeah, just like that. Well, they were going the wrong way. So I frowned at them really hard. I was so mad. And then I went into the next aisle, and I had to go down the aisle, and it turned out I was going the wrong way. Yeah, and so people were frowning at me, and they were so mad. Yeah, it was terrible. And so then I took my stuff. Well, I couldn't find all the stuff I needed, so I ended up actually buying a bunch of stuff I didn't need, and so I took it up to the counter. So then I went into the self-checkout, and I don't always like that because it's hard for me, and I get discombobulated, and I was super discombobulated today because of all that had happened. And so I went and I put my stuff on the scanner, and the voice just kept saying, "Put your item in the bag." Yeah, it did, just like that, and it was terrible, and I had already put the items in the bag! Oh! And everybody behind me was mad because I had to ask for help, and oh, it took too long. And then I went outside in the parking lot, and I fell down. Yes, I fell down and I hurt my knee and I think it's bleeding. Oh, it hurts really bad. And my bag was torn and the stuff was rolling all over the parking lot. All my stuff that I got that I didn't need. And then it started to rain. Yes, I had to walk home in the rain. Oh, thanks. That helped. But, oh, thanks. My knee really, really hurts. What's that? Band-Aids? Well, yeah, that might help. Thanks. Yeah. Oh, I'm so cold. I'm cold and wet from the rain. It was such a bad, bad day. Thanks. This does help, actually. Yeah. You know what? You're the most compassionate person I know. No, really. You always know what to say. Can I have a hug?
I have a couple of quick announcements to share with you this morning. The first one is we're about to introduce a new element to our Sunday services. It's called Selfie Roundup. And we're doing this because so many of you have said that the very favorite part about our Sunday services is when you get to see images of people that you're separated from. So what I'd like to do is invite you to start sending pictures of yourself with your family, in your garden, doing all of your summer activities. And then, and if you don't have my email address, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll find it now. What we hope to do is to create a montage of these photos once a month, like perhaps the first Sunday of the month. So those of you who get your pictures to me by Wednesday of this week will include those in our very first selfie roundup on August 2nd. Secondly, I know that some of you noticed or heard about the fact that our rainbow flags were recently vandalized. And I know this is upsetting, but I want you to take heart in the fact that people in our community who aren't even members of this fellowship were the first to note it and to care for the remaining remnants of those flags. They wrapped them up in ribbons out of reverence and left us a little love note telling us how much they appreciate the fact that we have rainbow flags out there. Because of this response, we were able to replace the first one on the south side of the building immediately, and the second one on the north side will go up in just a matter of days. And although it's heartbreaking to know that there are people in our community who feel compelled to deface our public statement about the value of all people, I want to assure you that we here at QUF are resolved in our commitment to publicly side with love and let the pride flags fly. What I'd like to do now is acknowledge and welcome those of you who are joining us this morning, especially those of you who are here for the first or second time. If you could take a moment to add your name and where you're from in the comment section, we would love to welcome you. Now, if you're having a hard time seeing the comment section, all you need to do is take your device out of full screen and you'll see the comments there on the right. We're just so glad you're here. It's good to be together. It's now time for our offering. If you would like to contribute to the building, programming, or staffing here at QUF, you have 3 ways to donate. You can either text the amount you would like to give to the number that will now be in the comment section or at the bottom of the screen. If that's too complicated, please feel free to go to our website, quuuf.org, and hit the donate button, or you can simply send a check to QUF. The address is also on the website. And now, we will gratefully receive your offering as we listen to our talented new pianist, John Hanson. Thank you, John, for the gift of your music. It's now time to share the joys and sorrows of this congregation. We always begin, though, with the acknowledgement that our personal joys and sorrows are only a fragment of the joys and sorrows of the larger community of life. And so we place this first stone, thinking in particular of the 5.4 million Americans who have lost their insurance, their health insurance, during this pandemic. The sad news is that more adults have become uninsured this year than any prior year in our history. May the recognition of this injustice give us the will to reimagine our national health care system so that every American has access to health care, regardless of employment status. And now within this congregation, I have no sorrows to report this week, but we do have 2 birthdays. We light the first candle for Joanna England, who began her 87th trip around the sun on July 16th. Happy birthday, Joanna. We love you. And this second candle is in honor of Suzanne Hempstead, whose birthday was on Friday, the day after Joanna. Happy birthday, Suzanne. We're so glad you were born. And now, we place our final stone, acknowledging all of those unexpressed sorrows and joys that were not shared today, but are in our hearts. I invite you now into a time of silence, followed by a musical response by John Hanson. Our reading this morning is by one of my colleagues, Victoria Stafford. May there be space today, tonight, in this moment or the next, with this breath or the next, to still your frantic mind, to slow your racing heart, to center your scattered spirit, to remember what steadies you, and anchor on something you love. Bird song in the morning, cup of coffee, this loved one far from home, but right there on your screen, laughing, waving, reassuring you that yes, they are okay. The dog at your side who has not learned and never will learn the word pandemic, but only treat and leash and nap and walk and good dog. You are such a good dog now and always. Anchor on that which you love and rest there just a moment. Finding stillness, just a moment. Slowing down, just a moment. Centering your worried mind. May there be space today and tonight and beyond for what you love. It's my great honor this morning to welcome our guest speaker, Florence Caplow. I know that she'll be familiar to many of you, and I want you to know that she is overjoyed to be back for a visit, even though it's only virtual. She hopes to come back in future summers. Florence, we welcome you.
Good morning. First of all, I just have to tell you what a joy it is to be speaking to you this morning. Although, honestly, it would be more of a joy to be in your beautiful sanctuary, looking out into your faces, and then going into fellowship hall afterwards and having coffee and chatting and catching up. But this is what we have. And I am planning on joining you after the service in the virtual coffee hour, so maybe we'll have a little chance to catch up then. I am coming to you from my living room in central Illinois. You might see a cat or two in the video field. We'll see how that goes. And it's just really lovely to be here. For those of you who don't know me, and I know that there have been many, many new people at QUF over the last 3 years since I was last in the pulpit. I am Florence Caplow. I was the ministerial intern at QUF in 2014-15, and then returned as your first assistant minister in 2016-17. Before I left, which just broke my heart, but needed to happen, to come back to the Midwest to be a support for my mother, Harriet McNeil, who is turning 92 years old in about 10 days. So here I am in central Illinois. I am the lead settled minister for a historic UU church congregation in Urbana, Illinois. And I've been here for the last 3 years. It is a very flat place, a long, long way from the waters of the Straits of Juan de Fuca, of the Olympic Mountains, and from you. However, I just have to say, I would not be who I am or the kind of minister I am if it wasn't for you. All the ways you and your wonderful Minister Emeritus, Reverend Bruce Bodie, nurtured me, cared for me, were kind to me on my first tentative steps into ministry. And so often I think of you with gratitude for all that you gave me and for the extraordinary loving foundation that you provided that still supports me to this day. So thank you. Thank you. And who could have imagined what we would be facing in the summer of 2020? If ever there was a time to cultivate compassion, it is now, as the pandemic continues to rage across the globe, killing the elderly and those who are already most vulnerable, as hundreds of thousands of people go to the streets in grief and rage to protest the continued systemic racism and the killing of Black people by the police, saying no more racism, no more. As so many are out of work, hungry and afraid, not knowing if they'll be able to cover their mortgage or rent payments in the next month, as our planet gets hotter and hotter. Compassion recognizes that we are all in this together, which I think we really know right now. And compassion has so many faces. Compassion can be fierce. It can be silent witnessing. It can be the tenderness of a mother or father. It can be simple kindness. It can be weeping together It can be strong and steady as a mountain. Today, I want to turn compassion like a beautiful gem, beautiful cut gem, looking at the few of the faces of compassion. There's a story from my own tradition about compassion. As some of you may know, I am also a Soto Zen priest and teacher. And this is a story about an extraordinary ancient Chinese family, the Pang family, who were tremendously wise. It was believed that the entire family was fully awakened. However, they made a living going from town to town selling baskets. And one day, Layman Pang and his daughter Ling Zhao were out on the road, and they crossed a little bridge. And on the other side, Layman Pang stumbled and fell hard to the ground. And his daughter Ling Zhao threw herself down beside him. And Layman Pang looked at her and said, "What are you doing?" And she said to him, "I saw you fall down, so I'm helping." And you might think, how is that helping? To help you, you reach out a hand and you take the other person's hand and you pull them up. But in that kind of helping, there's the person on the ground and there's the person standing and helping. And Ling Zhao knew that there are other ways to express compassion that are more together in the situation. I remember a call from a friend at a time not that long ago that was dark and painful for me. And in her attempts to be helpful, she offered unsolicited advice to me that I might consider keeping a joy journal and writing down my joys every day. I had to restrain myself from throwing the phone across the room, and I am not the kind of person who throws phones. But first of all, I teach practices about cultivating happiness and joy. Some of you were in my year-long Awakening Joy class there when I was an intern. And yes, I do know about keeping a joy journal, and I was pretty sure that that was not going to be helpful for the situation that I was in. And I hadn't asked for advice. What I really needed and wanted was someone to deeply listen and to be present with me. But worse than that, I felt the distance between us in her advice, her unintentional condescension from her place of relative happiness to my place of suffering. She thought she was being compassionate, but for me, it was the opposite. And I'm happy to report that we care deeply for one another, and we did renew our friendship from that time because everyone makes mistakes. And let me just say that the easiest mistake of all to make is to offer advice to a friend who's in a hard place. And the truth is that nearly always, for nearly everyone, they are not looking for advice. They are looking for your love. They are looking for your compassion. The word compassion has its roots in the Latin word compati, com meaning together with, and pati meaning to suffer together. And this word is related to empathy and altruism, although each has a slightly different valence. And I think of them as kind of along a continuum. So at this end is empathy. And empathy is that inner feeling of deep feeling with another's experience, whatever that experience might be, joy, pain, anger. To be empathetic is to feel with. And altruism is that kind act. In fact, my friend was being altruistic when she made this offering to me. But in the middle is compassion. And compassion has both elements of empathy and altruism. And from that place, the person feels not a sense of separation, but a sense of cultivating compassion is a primary spiritual practice in many, many different spiritual religious traditions. In Christianity, Mary is the embodiment of compassion. Jesus himself, his entire life and death is an expression of compassion. And within Buddhism, we have Kuan Yin, the bodhisattva of compassion, she who hears the cries of the world. And she is sometimes depicted as having 1,000 arms, and each arm has another helpful tool to alleviate suffering. And in the palm of each arm, each hand, is an eye. So 1,000 eyes to see what is happening and 1,000 arms to respond. There's another wonderful Zen story, also from ancient China, about Kuan Yin. And this one, I'm just going to read a little bit of it. Yunyan asked Dao Wu, how does the Bodhisattva of compassion use so many hands and eyes? Dao Wu said, it's just like a person in the middle of the night reaching behind them in search of a pillow. Think about that for a moment. It's the middle of the night. You're really mostly asleep, and you're adjusting your position and something just isn't quite right, and you reach for a pillow in your sleep and you place it somewhere to cradle your back. You're not thinking about it. You're not making a plan. You're just responding. Dao Wu says that's how the Bodhisattva of compassion uses all those hands and eyes. She doesn't think, oh, I am the helpful Bodhisattva of compassion. It's my job to be helpful. Let me relieve your suffering. She just sees and acts as naturally as reaching behind you for a pillow in the middle of the night. If you saw a puppy or kitten in distress, you would just act. You would just grab that puppy or kitten out of a bad situation. You wouldn't think and weigh whether or not that was the right thing to do, and you probably wouldn't even be thinking about whether or not you were a helpful and compassionate person at that moment. You would simply act. That's compassion. Over the last few years, researchers have become really interested in compassion as one of the positive human traits, where it comes from, what evokes it, and what keeps us from being compassionate. And when I'm interested in learning more about current research on positive traits, there's a couple of places I turn, but my favorite is the Greater Good Science Center out of UC Berkeley in California. In one of their articles, I read about a landmark study that was done by Pearl and Samuel Ohlgren. They found that children who have compassionate parents tend to be more altruistic. And they discovered this through this study of Germans who had helped rescue Jews during the Nazi Holocaust. What they found was one of the strongest predictors of this inspiring behavior was the individual's memory of growing up in a family that prioritized compassion and altruism. So, if you have children or grandchildren, and I have a feeling everyone in this congregation is someone who wants a more compassionate world, one of the best things you can do is show what a compassionate, altruistic life looks like to younger people, your children, to your grandchildren, to other young people in your life. In recent years, people have also started talking about self-compassion. And maybe you think, Isn't that a contradiction in terms? Isn't compassion always about others? But remember, if part of the wisdom of compassion, of real compassion, is understanding how deeply interconnected we are, then your well-being, my well-being, is just as important. I can't act from a place that doesn't also take care of my own well-being. I think about this a lot in terms of ministry, because most ministers go into ministry with a tremendous desire to help, to relieve suffering. And most ministers, myself included, tend to overwork to the degree that it is actually detrimental to their own health and well-being. And what is that? Is that true compassion? Or is that something else less wholesome, a kind of compulsive helping? Shouldn't true compassion take into account the person who's helping as well? I call this my koan of mystery, of ministry. It is mysterious for me, that I just keep having to work on again and again. I'll fall into this overworking pattern and then lose track of taking care of myself and have to stop and remind myself again that I matter too. So you probably know, if you're one of these over helpful people, shall we say, and I invite you to explore self-compassion as well as compassion to others. This moment that we are all living through is incredibly frightening and painful. And it is also a moment where compassion matters more than ever. Even wearing a mask is an expression of compassion. I care for you. I want to keep you well and safe, and so I will wear this slightly uncomfortable and unattractive thing in order to practice compassion. Or I think of the people in my current congregation, some in their 80s and 90s, who showed up at some of the very first marches for Black Lives Matter here in Champaign-Urbana. Some of them had not been out of their houses really for 2 months. And there they were, risking their health and life in order to stand in solidarity with the larger community. Luckily, it turns out most people in those marches were wearing masks and we were outside. And so we haven't seen the spike that we feared from them. But I was moved to tears by their commitment to compassion. We are all learning that we are in this together, that working to end racism is all of our work, not just the people in the Black community. That when a Black man is shot on the streets of Seattle, he is our brother. When an elderly woman dies alone in a nursing home, she is our grandmother. And everything we do matters. May we learn from this time a deeper, more powerful, more universal compassion, remembering that we are universalists, a compassion that could quite literally transform our world. Compassion is no longer optional. It is perhaps the only thing that could save us. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for being who you are and doing all the good that I know you do for this world. And all my love to you. Many blessings.
Let's close our service this morning by singing Comfort Me. comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul.
Before we extinguish our chalice this morning, I want to remind you that our guest speaker for next week is QUF member and ALPS co-chair, Stephen Cunliffe. Stephen will be speaking about slowing down on our journeys. I hope you can join us. And now, let us join voices for the extinguishing of our chalice. We extinguish our flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment, or the power of transformation. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. I hope that you can join us for our virtual coffee hour. If you don't have the link to that Zoom room, you'll find it in our comment section now. But first, let us turn our attention to pianist John Hanson for our postlude.